Educate the Whole Child came together in part out of the realization that the preparation most public schools provide is really completely inadequate for the challenges the future holds. I'm not going to have to worry about it because I'm 83, but these young people are coming along, and instead of building resilience and grit and inner balance and creativity for solving problems and initiative, we've been offering them how to do well on tests so that you can get into a snooty college and graduate and make a lot of money. Well, you know, people who are at this conference know that that's pretty superficial and it's pretty materialistic as well. So I'm going to share my screen here. There are a number of qualities that are not measured in tests and therefore don't count for a whole lot in our typical public schools system. And it's gotten, of course, a lot worse since No Child Left Behind. The three ones that I think are most important are resilience, creativity, and initiative. Sir Ken Robinson said, creativity is as important as literacy. And he's thinking about a world that's changing and that's going to demand people who can think on their feet and be resilient and come up with solutions for some really knotty problems. So the paradigm that we're working with, and Educate the Whole Child focuses on public schools because that's where the need is for change, the greatest need. The paradigm just has to change from one of accountability and a compliance culture in which the teachers are expected to not color outside the lines. All of this based on pretty materialistic thinking. We need instead to heed what these two dogs are saying to each other. In case you can't see it, the dog in the front says, it's always sit, stay, heal, never think, innovate, and be yourself. This was drawn by a neighbor of mine here in Massachusetts. I love the expression on the one dog's face. He looks really, really peeved, doesn't he? Anyway, what we aim to do in Educate the Whole Child is to really get more schools to buck the system and focus on the child, not on the data. Also to make schools not just head learning, but head, heart, and hands learning. And to provide hope and encouragement and models for those who want to change. So we do this by networking and having a really active website and being active on social media, by presenting at conferences like this, and by certifying schools. We've got a system where we will go into schools and do something like an accreditation, but it's much less onerous than that. We send a person in to, if the school indicates an interest, we'll send a person, and usually it's Tom Mcguire, to visit the school, spend 2 or 3 days, see if they really are doing what they claim to be doing, maybe do some coaching or in addition to observing there, and he writes up a report, and then ultimately the school will get a certificate. When you go to our website, which is www.educatethewholechild.org, you will see across the top one of the drop downs as action here slide. It'll say certificate there, or certification. So that's how you can find the forms if you're interested in getting your school moved toward certification. This is Ayla Gavins, who was a principal at the time at Mission Hill School in Boston. She's receiving her framed certificate for the school. There are a number of principles that we try to encourage and then document for our schools. These are guidelines, they are not mandates, but let me see if there's just another, no, that's not it. Let me go back here. I suggest you take a photo of this slide or jot down some notes because you'll be referring to these in the breakout. Well, let's see, we've got just a relatively small number of people, so we probably won't need a breakout, right, Tom?
Yeah, and I think we can do this as a small group.
We've got about 6 people. So I'll be able to put this on the screen for you. The first of the qualities or the intelligences that we're trying to unlock is the one that we have in most schools in abundance, and that's your left brain intellectual kind of intelligence. The second is the intuitive, more creative right brain intelligence, the artistic part, which is really pathetically neglected in most cases, or if it is in the schools, it's in a silo. So you take an art class or a music class or do something after school in the band, but it's not integrated into, let's say, studying history through the eyes of the great painters or through music or something like that. So we try to see that art is integrated into the other courses. The third is structured physical movement for the older students, unstructured play for the younger ones. Fourth is handwork. If you can make something that's useful, that's great for self-esteem, even if it's something as trivial as a pot holder. You know, you can take that home and give it to mom, and you've done something. And there's a certain wisdom that comes through working with your hands that you can't get any other way. The fifth area is engagement with nature and community. We like to get students out into nature. And in all of these, we really like to stress, there's a series of pictures on handwork, getting people out into the community and working, visiting a nursing home, taking a biography, doing a video from that. These are the kinds of things that really add up. And so we'll be coming back to talk about this in a minute. There are a number of paths up the mountain. We don't have a prescription, but we want people to move toward greater freedom, greater creativity, and greater initiative. Okay, I'm going to stop this screen share so that you can see Tom Mcguire, and then we'll go back to screen sharing when he's ready.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I want to thank Chris for his hard work that he goes through all the time to find the money to do this and support the work philosophically and tangibly. Just a few seconds on me. I was a teacher for a long time, and I was one of these people who were fortunate to be around the right people. Last night they were talking about the big picture learning schools. My first principal was Dennis Litke, who started Big Picture Corporate, the company. And he later on, I went to work at Keene State College full time, and he gave me a program called Principal Residency Network, which I did for 17 years in New Hampshire, Vermont, Western Massachusetts, and Manhattan, New York City schools. So from that, after I stopped working in the trenches, so to speak, Chris and I hooked up. And what I do is I go around to these schools that we find, and it's the most extraordinary work. And I don't use that word lightly. These are schools that operate under the same rules, the same constraints financially. These are not schools that are any more gifted with money or resources than anywhere else, but they do extraordinary things in their communities for children who are most often in need. So the first school I want to tell just a little bit about is Saharas Elementary School in Mesa, Arizona. Some of the things I'm going to say are going to sound like, oh yeah, right. But it's incredible in the sense that the school has 1,000 students, K through 6. The principal, who's left this year to move into a high school in Mesa because he wanted to see if he could do the same for a high school that he did for an elementary school. So some of the things I'll just rattle off that were demonstrated to be true. And I've spent the week or two, over almost 2 weeks there. And a couple of things. Mr. Oliver, Mike Oliver, was never in his office because his office is filled floor to ceiling with children's literature. The children can come in and take a book. There's no writing down what book you've taken. There's no report required. In the 12 years that Mr. Oliver was principal, there were 0 referrals for misbehaving, fighting, or any other way, or anything that was like that. Because students learned and the teachers learned and the parents learned that all problems could be solved peacefully. And it's an incredible, incredible thing to say that out loud and expect people to go, oh, yeah, right. It exists and it's beautiful. It's just filled with literature, art, and music and project-based learning. So there it is. And it's an oasis in a literal desert. And it's very beautiful. So we can look up more about that one. The second school I want to talk a bit about, and these are all very beautiful. Again, I've stepped into them. You don't know what's going to be. And each time I've walked out, they really touch your heart as well as your intellect. The project school, which is a publicly funded charter school. And it was a group of activist parents and activist teachers who, to use the phrase, took advantage of, but in a positive way, used Indiana's charter laws that we use so often by corporations to start their own school in Bloomington. And the school is focused on the social and emotional needs of every student. It's outward bound. They do projects within the city of cleaning up planting gardens, helping older people. The older students go and help homebound grandparents, and they do all the civic functions that you would think that a city or a state should do. And I was there during the standardized testing period, and some of the students hadn't finished, and with 4th and 5th graders. And I was in a room with 60 children and 1 teacher. And I was a teacher my whole life and in middle schools. And I sat there and going, this is not going to go well. You could hear a pin drop for 45 minutes. And she read a story and they were mesmerized. Then another one is, I was walking up and down a lot of stairs in this building. And the first day I was there and I noticed these little terrier kind of dogs, it was 2 of them, would just run past me or come up to me. And just finally I asked the first day, I said, what's with the dogs? And one of the counselors explained to me that these dogs become to be inherently connected to know which children need them. So they go around the building and they sit and they stay a while with the kids who walk in and are upset for whatever reason. Myriad reasons that children come into school upset. And that one always brings tears to my eyes when I think about it, because it's very real. And it's a very wonderful intervention. And someone had the moral courage to step up and do that and to maintain it. So that's just 2 examples from that school. It's very heavily steeped in deep academic achievement. This is not all touchy-feely, it's not all the wonderful things, but it's all of it. It's all of it, not at the expense of the child, but to the betterment of the child. And then the last one that I'll cover very briefly here is the Compass School in Westminster, Vermont, just over the Massachusetts border. And this school is 7th through 12th. This is one of these schools that we were talking about a little bit before the session started, that in Vermont, small towns are given monies to send their children to private schools if this town is not big enough to build their own school or sustain their own school. In Vermont, like a lot of rural areas is losing population over the last 10 or 15 years. Compass School stepped in 1999 and runs a school that exemplifies the best coalition of essential schools work, the best hands-on, the best outward bound education that you'll find. And former friend of mine and a former colleague in Principal Residency Network, who actually was one of my students, runs the school. My daughter Zoe graduated from the school a while back now. So I know the school well, but to walk in and find a sense of peace, a sense of social justice activity, a sense of awareness of the beautiful area around them and how they work hard to protect the environment. And it's all done with, and they have guide student dogs as well, who they also walk around. It's not quite as obvious as it is in Bloomington, but these dogs are there for kids who are suffering and having some hard times. They're there as guide dogs as well. So within that, you have, and we have other schools too, but we're only talking about these, is the fact that we have schools that exist, they're publicly funded, and they follow all the same rules for testing, all the same rules for reporting, all the same rules, financial constraints, special education law, everything is adhered to at a high expertise, but they do it differently. They do it differently because they made up their mind that children deserve better. Children deserve to have their spiritual side uplifted as well as they do their academic and physical self. And when you have a school like that, and when you have schools like that, so part of our function here is to hopefully share the excitement of, of finding places and knowing that there's some young teachers here or people who hope to be teachers. And if you go after these schools and you look hard enough, they exist. And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm just honored to find the work and to be supported in being able to tell these stories of these schools that just sit among us. And every one of the leaders are very humble. They're people who work night and day to make sure that the children are safe and that the teachers are respected and honored for their work. It's something very, very different than happens in far too many schools across the country. So that's about my wrap on the schools. Anybody have any questions or anything I can go into a little bit more deeply quickly? Okay, all right, very good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to another little phase of my existence that I mentioned before, and that was leadership development. And I'm going to just give you, and if you want to jot these down, it may be nice things to refer back to. So the first one on these are leadership qualities. So it's up on the board here. Moving the vision. All too often, I've been in schools as a teacher, and then in different circumstances, where you go into a school and there is no vision. The vision is to make it through the end of the day. The vision is to make sure the tests are given on time, or that the paperwork is sent to the state office on time, or to the superintendent on time. And it's literally an actuarial daily getting from 8:30 to 4:30. And that's it. You just do tasks. There's no greater vision to it. So moving the vision is really thing, but first you have to have a vision. And if you have a vision, it needs to be cultivated and codified by more than just yourself. It has to be a community that understands it. It has to be the community of teachers and parents and taxpayers in general and students in particular. The next one is, I think, I'll just say this out loud, the most important one. And I would write this down and underline it, because throughout your career, whatever you do, we're going to be tested on this one. It's called moral courage. Moral courage is when you walk into a building and you make the decision to do whatever it is that's best for children, and not to lower your standards, but to keep on patiently pushing back against things that are not serving children well. So for a leader who acts with moral courage, they're always willing to look for it, but you're always willing to leave a job before you do things that you find are injurious to children. So you're not going to say, well, I just bought a new house, so I'm going to stay here, and the superintendent's telling me to do horrible things. But what do you do? So the moral courage piece is something that, in our country, in every layer of our society, to make any kind of change and to really stay in touch with our spiritual guiding principles, that we need to act with moral courage. So, and then just working down the list more quickly is the instructional leadership for positive learning environment. You can't tell people to be kind, to be loving, to work hard, to help others, when you don't exhibit those traits yourself. So part of this plan, part of this work, and again, this came all from the Principal Residency Network at a big picture company. So these are not my words, but I've used them in my career for the past 20 years and in my life, I believe. So the next one is instructional leadership for positive environment. What I just said is everything we do in the school has the students understanding why we do it, has the teachers, has the community, has the parents understanding why are we doing this, and have a good long conversation with whomever wants to engage about why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing what we're doing and what the outcome is for children. Then the other one is management that's personal, flexible, collaborative, and effective. In other words, be a real human being, no matter what the office is, no matter what the rules from the state or the higher ups of the school board is that you do each day what you know in your heart and your soul, not your intellect necessarily sometimes, that should drive it, but it's not the only indicator, is that I'm doing what's best for children. Every day I come to this job that I'm doing it for the benefit of their well-being in their future. And then the last one is, you can do all of that you want, but if you don't bring people along with you, if you don't bring the parents along, and if you don't bring the people who think what you're saying is a bunch of baloney in the beginning, if you don't patiently work with them to have them understand it, then you're constantly fighting these battles where you're being distracted from the work. So I think all of those go in tandem with each other. So, but I would always circle back to number 2, which is moral courage, because without that, the rest of these are going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to work well together. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we have our discussion questions, and since we're a small group, we can do that in a total panoramic view, all of us together, instead of going to the tricky technology of breakout sessions. So the first part is to hear from those of you who are in schools. And can we unmute people, Mindy? So we can hear from A. Smith and
I can request for them to unmute, but I can't unmute them without their permission.
Oh, okay. There we go. Gilbert, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there we go.
I'll give you some video too.
Maybe tell us a little bit about your situations. Are you in schools right now teaching?
Yes, sir. I'm at elementary school at Hoover Elementary. It's in Medford.
Oh, yeah.
If everybody's from around here.
Uh-huh.
I'm answering these 2 questions.
Well, now let's find out who A. Smith is, who is also not only, well, not muted. So we don't know if you're, there we go. Oh, yes, I recognize you.
Yeah. So I'm not currently teaching.
Okay, but you have in-school experience.
Uh-huh.
Great, okay. So Tom, how do you want to proceed?
Well, we have, we have a couple of questions. I can read them out and maybe people can respond, if that's okay.
Okay. So we can see them, they're on the screen.
Oh, okay, they're on the screen, okay. Discussion questions. Do you see the whole child principles at your school? And number two, how can you move this whole child vision forward at your school? Those are big, broad questions. We should be able to find some ground in there. So
I'll go ahead and get started, if you don't mind.
please.
Okay, good.
So
Jenny.
my name's Jenny James. I teach at a Waldorf school in Ashland, Oregon, and didn't know anything about the Waldorf principles before going there to teach. And I'm a middle school math teacher there. But I definitely see the whole school or the whole child principles taught at school. We have handwork for all of the kids, and they all take, woodworking, and much of our rituals and traditions at the school are connected to the cycles of nature. And then there's a lot of community service that we've done. In fact, we've just celebrated Michaelmas, and then the kids all had a community service to go out and clean up the streets in the park that we're next to and things like that. So I'm seeing that happen at our school in really positive ways, so much so that, I'm putting my son at that school who's only in second grade, knowing that this is a better option for him. And then for me professionally, I didn't know this exists. What I didn't know is that this could exist in a public school situation, how do we bring these kinds of elements of education into a public school that's funded by the public for me, it's clearly the better way to educate a child. And I think there's so many teachers and administrators out there that want this to happen. It's how do we bring this to a much more universal concept of education in America?
Can I just say, I think I'd be happy to, and that's for Jenny and whoever else, if you want to somehow get your email address or an address, be happy to send you a full report. These are pretty substantial that go into much more detail than we're talking here about what people have had to do politically or awareness raising. And so that's something we'd be more than happy to share with you.
Great. I can put it in the chat right now if you'd like me to.
Yeah. And if you ever wanted to talk, again, if you want to get organized, something that we can share phone numbers, and we can just, there's time in our work that's dedicated to help people like yourself get moving.
That's great. I'll do that. Thanks a lot, Tom.
Yeah, and the email, the emails are on the website, too. So you can be right after this, if you want to just send an email to myself and Chris, we can start a conversation right now. So
I'll be on tonight.
Okay, cool.
So Gilbert, why don't you see if some of these things might apply in your situation? And you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, so in my situation, my school, it's K through 6, there's 700 kids, and not talking anything bad about the school, but it's a great school. The teachers have a lot of things going for them, but I don't really see the whole child principles like going on in my school, just for the fact of there's so many kids there that everybody's understaffed. The classroom teachers, I'm a PE teacher, and so I have a triple kindergarten class. I have many double ups in my period, so a lot of the kids aren't really getting a great experience, whereas some of the classes are getting me and 20 kids. And so their experience of PE and their experience of their classroom is a lot different than these. It's just hard to do that with so many kids. So I don't really see that going on at Hoover.
Can I just say, it's one of the beautiful parts about the Saharas school is that they have 1,000 kids. And, people use the number. First of all, you can have a school that's the perfect size and have a really lousy school because there's no leadership, there's no vision. You can have the largest school, like with, as I said, 1,000 K through 6 kids. That's the most beautiful place, literally, I've stepped foot in, bar none, as far as the school is concerned. So I'm just saying, where that awareness is not to say like, well, my school's not like that, but the awareness is the school can be like that with the right outlook and the right set of tools and the right focus on the conversations, and to read. I'll be happy if we have a conversation to send you the entire thick report that we do on a school, if it helps you or anybody else want to take a look at it and see how you could change your school and what would have to happen. And also we're available to collaborate as well. So it's not like we're just going to dispense information. If you want to stay in touch with myself and Chris, we can have conversations that can help you along the way.
Yeah, just put something in the chat.
Absolutely.
Oh, I see we have some more people here than I thought.
Okay.
So who else wants to
I'll go.
go?
Hey, Sasha. Hi, Sasha.
Hi. So I'm a wellness teacher up at Roseburg High School. And I see that our principal has these ideas, and this is in conversations with her, things that we want to work towards. I don't know if you know anything about Roseburg. I love the area, but the consensus is a very narrow mindset in our community. And so some of these things in her and I's conversation are like, yes, this is what we need to do. And we are looking at the avenues of how do we combat community traditions and beliefs and old school ways of thinking to start to make these changes. And we're having conversations now of just trying to implement some more just cross-curricular activities to try and bring that connectedness between the arts and the gen ed classes and things like that. But I see that it wants to be done, but we have to the outward fight of kind of getting everybody on board with it. That the buy-in from all the stakeholders is an issue in our community.
I have a question about that, actually. I am a student. I have not taught, so my experience is just limited and just to what I've read and learned so far. But I wonder sometimes if we include the community more in the sense of like reaching out to experts in the fields to teach children, if they'll feel more included, because it does feel like there's quite a gap between like academia and like blue collar life. And I wonder if we start to like incorporate more of like everyday people in the community as far as like taking students places like, water treatment plants or electric plants or construction sites or places that allow for like understanding of why we learn things and kind of applying that to like real life experiences. And then also in the same respect, giving credit to professions that are vital to our community that maybe sometimes feel alienated by academia, that I wonder if that bridge would be gapped a little bit. And like, that's kind of like when I write my papers about my future school, that's what I see is like that community, like people feeling comfortable to come into the schools, because of right now we have like a lot of gates around schools and schools are very, for protection's sake, but that protection has almost kind of caused a little bit of a barrier, I think, between the community. And I wonder if there's a safe way to include the community when they feel comfortable and people want to ask classes to come and learn. So I don't know if you guys have experienced that at all.
It's a good question. Maybe Tom, does everybody know about expeditionary learning? Is that's
Yeah, I'm not sure. The expeditionary learning model is, it's all around building community, and its focuses on mainly environmental studies, but environmental not just in trees and plants, but the environment of the community and the people who come to your school. So if you look them up, it's a really nice model. One of our schools up in Massachusetts is an expeditionary learning school, and they really codify a lot of the broader things we were talking about. And I would also encourage the comments, to look at that, the exhibited leadership qualities, and the vision is so important. The conversation is like we have piecemeal, and I'm not being critical in the least. I don't mean it to be that way, but we, out of our good heart and our good soul, we have these sidebar conversations with 8 people or 4 people, and then we go and we get excited. But it's the work that it takes to methodically and patiently and lovingly explain that one by one to each person. And when the parent comes in, you have a meeting, you explain it to them, and they go away and think about it. With your colleagues, you talk about it, and you have research that shows it. And then you come back to, it's like, I've been doing this 6 months, nobody's buying it. The moral courage piece is that you keep on going. A moral courage piece is that it's not like, well, heck with this town, it's not worth it. And that's easy to do, and it's easy to understand. And I'm not being critical. I was early in my career, I probably was right there with you. But we know more now, we know better now. And our little project is just another dot of good information along a line that says when the pieces are right, when the conversation is heartfelt, when the research about the positive effects of all the interventions we've been talking about here are done well, they're extraordinarily effective. They don't fail on their own. Really good interventions, outdoor, play-based, serving lunch to old people who live in the town, helping people who are sick, plant gardens for old people or people who are handicapped in some way. And to do these beautiful things and then write about it, apply the math to it, the science to it, and the communication skills it takes. Those are examples of how it's not just, oh, look how cute that is. That's really nice. That's very this, very whatever people want to put names on it. No, it changes people's lives, and not just the children, but the people in the community who are often paying the taxes that fund the school. And I think it's done, when it's done with the heart, it's done with the soul, and it's done for a spiritual reason, it works. And I think that that's the really nice part about it. So
the reason I mentioned expeditionary learning is that they make a point of getting outside the classroom.
Right.
And they also, at the same time, try to bring community members into the classroom, so that there's this breathing, if you will, in and out, so that, and there's another school that Tom and I know of, it's a Waldorf High School here in Western Massachusetts, where this is a very small school. They have no library, they have no cafeteria or auditorium. They don't have a gym, but the town is the school, kind of. I mean, they have classrooms, but the kids go into town and they eat at a diner or some other little shop. They use this town library, and they are interacting with the people in the town all the time. So some of the others of you talk a little bit about elements that are of the whole child qualities that are in your school. I put them up on the screen again.
Can I ask a question until someone pops in? So I would imagine I missed the beginning, I was in a different session and hopped over to yours about 10 minutes in. I would imagine that the schools that, it sounds like the two of you have an organization where you come in and help support schools make a shift. There clearly has to be buy-in with the adults, with, I supervised student teachers for many years. This is one of my hats in my career. And I came to realize, I thought everybody went into education because they wanted to do it for the kid or to change education like I went in. And boy, oh boy, was I awakened to some people go into education because for that reason, they really, really want to either have children experience or students experience the wonder and greatness that they did, or folks are going into education and they don't have any consciousness of it to get their control needs met. And then of course there's a lack of, relationship there. So that's what I'm wondering is when you've run into situations like you've obviously had to, where the teacher might be at a school where maybe the administration or, the majority of the teachers have made this commitment to shift. And maybe there are adults there that have no interest. They like their job, but they have no interest in doing that inner work themselves. And I can't imagine that shift could happen without the adult. Mindful, I live in Minnesota and mindfulness is just thrown around. It drives me nuts. Well, let's do a mindfulness minute. We'll all stop and just, there's no instruction with it or, modeling with it. So I would imagine there are still folks, you see what I'm saying, right? That adults, when they aren't in it themselves and they can't hold that space for the students, how do you shift them?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we wanted to do this conference and other outreach we do And those are, I mean, all of your points are so valid, but what we want to do is to hold out the light and the hope that there are communities, because of leadership and because of people who are willing to follow the leadership. And it's enlightened leadership. It's not just somebody who's going to come in who promises everything but doesn't have the skills to carry it off. It's often, I've met so many people over my many years of developing leadership and working with leaders that have struggled, is that no one really is talking insincerely. They really want kids to be engaged. They really want parents to be involved. They want teachers to feel good about what they do and give them feedback, but they lack the skills to follow through on each of those different aspects. So one of the key parts is to finding leaders that have the skill and the patience and the tenacity, for the lack of a better word, to overcome the disbelief in teachers who have been there a while, community members who have seen poor leadership, and to ride it out for a couple of few years and look back and say, here we are, it's changed. Here we are, we're really doing what you've always wanted to do. But it takes that leadership role, and it takes that focus that has the moral courage is the only word for it. The word to overcome all of the hurdles, because we keep those beautiful kids in our eyes, in our heart, and in our mind. And it does, if that hard piece isn't part of it, every single one of these people I've talked to at length will eventually cry during a conversation. They will break down and cry because they're letting themselves see all the work it's taken to bring their school to these very beautiful places. It's not easy, but letting kids slide through the system and end up as part of a horrible fall off the other end, and just wherever the heck you end up with using drugs, or you lose an economy that doesn't have any jobs for them, or whatever it might be. If school doesn't prepare them as to be thinkers and workers and activists, then it's not going to happen in our culture. And
there's another option that I'd like to mention for dedicated teachers who are holistically oriented and are frustrated because there's too much inertia and too many people in their school who are maybe just waiting for retirement kind of thing. And that is, some of us have reservations about charter schools, especially charter schools that are basically corporate and just in it for the money.
Right.
But if teachers get together who are really dedicated and have an ideal and have leadership and start their own school, you can now do this with a charter. And we have some schools that we have certified in Baltimore in an absolutely wretched neighborhood. But the parents got together and they had some leadership and they decided, we can do better than this and we'll start our own school. And damned if they didn't do it. And it's really successful. They have conferences there now, and Tom can talk about it a little bit. But I think as long as they're not corporate, I think that charters do offer a way out, sort of thing.
I think just one more word. If you look up cityneighbors.org, they have a foundation there too in Baltimore. It could be a role model for the work that you're thinking about doing, because as I was told they have 3 schools. They have 2 elementaries, middle and high school, and they have also, as I said, have a foundation. And again, it's just a assemblage of hardworking people, because all of the principals have told me that for the last 8 to 10 years, there's never been a day where someone who walked through that door didn't know someone that was shot. Most days, someone knew somebody who was killed by gunfire, by violence of some kind. So this is what they deal with. This is not just because the plant shut down or because somebody happened, whatever it might be. This is the blight of America, the racial blight, and they're overcoming it by being there for these kids. The rate of kids going to college and staying in college and succeeding in college is tremendously high against all odds. So I think to read about some of these places on your own, to go to their website and see the materials, it's very uplifting, because there are so many data points along the way that show us that so many schools fail for many different reasons. But we're trying to show people that with the right conditions, there can be schools that do amazing things. Yeah, no, we also like to just say that it'd be great if you just check out our website. You know, just check it out, and there's a lot more depth and stories on there that that I think may find you, you know, that you may find very, very interesting to look at, because each school is compelling. We visit schools that we're recommended to us. So if you know any schools in your area, we're looking obviously to travel safely when COVID's safe, but you know, we're looking for these schools that help uplift other people. So please look at our website, and if you get to the point where you want more information, you can contact myself or Chris, and we can just send you out the reports. They're in depth, they have deep levels of information and things in them. So we're here to help. We're not here to charge anybody money or be part of anything other than to help you take steps towards finding a better way to educate yourself and to help yourself find a safe place to work and a safe place to be the most effective teacher you can be. So I hope we hear from you again, because again, there's no charge, there's no stakes or strings attached to it. It's just us wanting to help people who are exploring this path.
Several people did give their email addresses, and I put that together for you guys, and I will send them to
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Mindy. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. I just wanted to make a plug at the end here for school gardens. This is a school where they have chickens, and little kids really get into it with animals and stuff. But even if you're just doing some vegetables, there's so much you can do to teach math, in terms of planting your garden and ordering seeds, and then after you harvest things, doing up a recipe and preparing, you know, some pumpkin bread, let's say in the fall, because pumpkins come right when school's in session again. There are all kinds of activities. One of the schools that Tom and I know, the kids have a garden, they harvest materials, they make up recipes, they put together a cookbook, which they then sold at the school fair. So there's writing, there's math, there's all kinds of things you can do with school gardens. Yeah. This is, so this slide here is from Garcia School in the first one that we certified. It's in South Texas near the Rio Grande border. But the kids are all out there growing things that'll end up in the school cafeteria.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. Yeah.
All those kids coming in there speak only Spanish, and then they gradually do 90% Spanish in the kindergarten, and then 80% Spanish, 20% in the first grade, and on up until they graduate, they're completely bilingual and bicultural. They aren't shamed out of their language. It's a wonderful school.
In case this is not anywhere else, our website is educatethewholechild.org. So
I did put that in the chat for everybody a few times.
Thank you, Mindy.
You're welcome.
You're always ahead of me. I like this. This is good.
And just so everyone knows, it is 1:50, where you guys have scheduled a 10-minute stretch break till the next presentation. But I just want to say thank you so much to Tom and Christopher personally. I thought this was really, really helpful and inspirational. So thank you.
Thank you. It was great. It's great meeting you. I hope to hear from you again.
Thanks to all of you for coming.
Thank you so much.